Ericsdale, Manitoba. Seems like your typical small town. The quiet streets, the rustling forests. It's hard to tell that this community of less than 1,000 people once had Manitoba's most wanted criminal as a frequent guest. Percy Mogi spent most of his adult life in and out of the correctional system. During his many 10-year sentences, he became one of the first people to escape Stony Mountain Institution in 1960. With nothing but his wits about him, Percy Mogi built a shelter just a few kilometers away from Ericsdale, where he lived until his capture. This is the story about Mogi's cabin. Escaping Stony Mountain in the 60s was no easy task, but luckily for Mogi, he was well equipped.
He was a locksmith, and he was able to make keys for virtually any lock, and he made keys for, I believe, either 3 or 4 locks to get from where he was in the penitentiary to the outside. And then he had some type of long pole with some kind of a grapple hook on the end, and that's how he got over the wall. He threw the grapple hook over the wall and then climbed up the pole.
In order to survive, he found it was necessary to tap into local resources. His previous experiences made the task easier. After his escape, Percy chose to settle a few kilometers outside of Ericsdale, where he built a private cabin.
He was able to live there because he was, I guess, a locksmith and was able to make keys and stuff for some of the local businesses, and he would go in at night and do his shopping, I guess you could say. Wow. and came and went, and basically people really never knew he was there until he was discovered by a couple of local native people that were out hunting for Seneca root one spring, and they stumbled across the cabin, and they asked him what he was doing there, and he said he was trapping, and they thought that was kind of strange because it was the wrong time of the year to be doing that.
Yeah.
So then they subsequently went to the local RCMP station and basically turned him in, and they came back and arrested him.
After a bit more than 10 months of living in secrecy, Percy Mogi's tale of freedom was bound to come to an end. John Worm's book, Over the Prison Wall, documents the events.
It seemed that he had just fallen asleep when he was awakened by a tremendous crash at his door. He jerked his head up in time to see a big form standing in the doorway with the sights of a revolver trained on him. He groped for something beside his bed instinctively, but found only a sharp metal rod.
"Put your hands up and come out!"
shouted a determined voice, and he knew it was all over.
"Are you Percy Mogi?"
asked the policeman, as Percy lifted his arms skyward.
"That's right,"
he replied, trying not to show the disappointment he was feeling. He recognized the Mountie in the early morning light as the corporal from Lundar, whom he had rubbed shoulders with in Arborg a few weeks back.
I was born and raised in Ericsdale and was living there at the time that he was captured. I remember going there with my parents a day or two after he had been captured, and to see, the cabin and the site. And at the time, there was no actual road access to the site. You could only drive within about a mile, and then you had to walk through bush and swamps. And even though I was only about 8 years old, I remember that very vividly.
As soon as word of Percy's capture hit the town, the residents were full of curiosity. Everyone wanted to see Mogi's cabin. Over several decades of neglect, the cabin was destroyed by locals for use of firewood and storage. However, the story remained a hot topic.
One morning, myself and 2 other fellows, one who has passed away, were sitting in a coffee shop, and we got talking about the story of the jailbreak and how he lived in the community and everything, and none of us had ever seen the site where his cabin was built. And so we decided to go out and see if we could locate it. We knew what quarter section it was on, but we didn't know exactly where it was. Mm-hmm. So we went out after coffee, and we spread out about 100 feet wide, between us, and walked through the bush on the quarter section. And after about a half an hour, we found the old cabin. It had been partially demolished. One of the local farmers decided it would be a good supply of firewood, and so he had taken the roof off and he had torn the walls down till they were only about 1.5 feet high, and that was all that was left, that and the old stove and a little bit of furniture there. And we decided then and afterwards when we talked it over that it would be a good idea to possibly build some kind of a replica of it.
Keith Lundale has lived in Ericsdale since the 70s and is a member of the Chamber of Commerce.
Mogi's to me is something that was a folklore for our community to maybe embrace as a benefit to tourism. And I think that's what we looked at. Mogi was a character, and I think that my recollection of Mogi is that's neat. It's a story that I think a movie could be made out of, and I always relish the fact that if we could have made, because it had a good storyline and a good plot and so forth.
After the approval from the Chamber of Commerce, the cabin was resurrected for all to see in the form of a replica. How can people visit Percy's cabin?
There's easy access. We have a road that actually was named after Mogi, Mogi's Road, and just outside the perimeter of Ericsdale, it's 4 kilometers. There's a sign that actually directs you to Mogi's, straight down Mogi's Road, and there is a sign right at the entrance to tell you how far Mogi's cabin is. It's 3/4 mile from that point, and it's a walking trail that you can walk in, and we actually provided a mobile site, service to it by a 4-wheeler or something originally. We don't do this right now, but hopefully that we can maybe look at changing that.
The resurrection of Mogi's cabin has brought pride to the community of Ericsdale. Even the locals are familiar with Percy Mogi's story.
Percy's hideout near Ericsdale was an instant tourist attraction after his capture on June 10, 1961. People came from far and wide to see for themselves where Manitoba's favorite fugitive had spent a good deal of his time during his 10.5 months of freedom. Everything that was movable disappeared as souvenirs, and finally, a few years later, even the cabin was taken away.
The mystery of Percy Mogi lasted just 10 months, but has lived on for decades. 2 years later, he was released from prison and arrested just 1 year after from breaking into a restaurant on Pembina Highway in Winnipeg. On August 8, 1974, Percy died at home for complications from a stroke. This is the story of Percy Mogi. What other mysteries hide in the forest?